a little dot on my touch screen. I'm trying to get this little dot off your nose. That's probably what everybody saw for the first thing today is me sitting here pointing to the screen. Well, you can't actually see. Here's my finger pointing to the screen, getting something off of Caitlin's nose. It showed up on the screen.
Oh, man. Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a good Wednesday.
Hello.
So today we're gonna flip the script a little and have Audra take over and talk about some publicity tips that she frequently has to remind authors of. So we thought this would be a great venue and way of talking about those tips that are pretty important if you are in an interview situation.
Yeah, definitely good tips for the new author, but sometimes all authors ought to be need to be reminded of them as they step in to do interviews. Interviews can be a scary thing for a lot of people, and really want to just calm your nerves, alleviate any of the fears, and kind of help you through some things. And I'm going to talk about some things that kind of pop up, you know, in the course of having conversations with authors and some of the things that they voice as concerns on a semi-regular basis. But kind of want to cover some of that for you. And if you're a new author thinking about, okay, what do I need to know? Hopefully we'll be able to fill in some blanks for you. But I have a quick question for Caitlin.
Oh, okay.
You get on, does your nose start itching and
No, my nose starts to run. That's what happens. Yeah. So I have a Kleenex right here.
Oh, I have one over here too, but it's like, yeah, it's one of those things that it's not until I really get on camera or realize that my face is starting to itch or I have this, anyway, my nose is really itching right now. And I'm like, okay, ignore the itch. I also have the problem of I'll get on the phone and all of a sudden start needing to sneeze and needing to cough.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it always happens that way.
Always happens that way. So it happens when you're doing an interview. Here's one of my interview tips. Have a cup of water nearby. That frog gets in your throat because sometimes that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So also have a pad of paper and a pencil next to you in case you want to jot something down to mention later. But I'll kind of get into a little bit more of that a little bit further down the road. I have some kind of a sequence I kind of want to go through first.
Ooh, okay.
So, and I'm going to try to tie them, and if I go in sequence, maybe they will tie together because you know me, Caitlin, I tend to sometimes get a little bit scattered and in weird loops, and that's something actually some good interview tips as well. So I'll kind of dive right in. First of all, I want to encourage all of you authors out there to take advantage of every opportunity that comes your way, or at least when it comes to radio. I know you can't always pay for travel to do TV that comes up. That's something that we talk about with an author. We talk about with their publisher about what budgets and realistic expectations are as far as TV is concerned. But when it comes to radio or podcast, take advantage of every opportunity that comes your way because you never know who might be listening. And I know that we are all busy people, but especially if you have a book releasing, you are only going to have a small window, probably of working with your publicist. And it's really important in the first couple of months after your book releases to try to keep an open calendar, keep an open schedule, and be flexible in order to take care of those interviews as much as you can. Mm-hmm. Now, I try to respect if somebody has a Tuesday morning Bible study and a Wednesday afternoon appointment standing, every week. I will do everything I can to try to schedule around those things, knowing that that's certain things that you have blocked off on your schedule. We'll do my best to do that. Some interviews only happen on Wednesdays or only happen on Tuesday mornings, and sometimes we have to work around those kind of things. But I will try to be respectful as much as I can, but be as flexible as you can. And the one thing that you may not think about is if you're really hard to schedule, that gives the message to a radio station or to a host that you don't think that their program is very important. And that you just aren't making it a priority. And you never want to give that impression. So make sure you always answer your publicist back, or if you're for some reason doing this kind of thing on your own, always answer back as quickly as you can. Try to make your commitments within 24 hours so that you don't come off as not caring about talking about your book. Because if you don't care about talking about it, why should anybody else care? It's your baby. It's your message. If you felt that on your heart to write about it, you ought to be willing to talk about it and be eager to do that.
Amen. I feel like we have so many authors who come to us and say, like, I don't want to brag about my book. I don't want to come across as too self-promoting or something like that. But I'm like, you took the time to write a book. You should be proud of it. Your book is the best.
There's a difference between being passionate about your subject and being self-promoting.
Yeah, that's so
I want to make sure that's clear, because you don't want to oversell your book. And I'm going to get into that here in a second too. Do not oversell your book, but you have to be passionate about your message.
You have to come across as an expert, basically.
You need to come across as an expert. You absolutely don't want to do get on the radio and come across as a commercial.
Definitely.
Absolutely want to do that. But you need to be able to communicate. And that definitely leads me into, okay, now which way do I want to go? My notes are scattered. Okay. Okay, let me jump into this. Know your subject, be passionate about your subject, but remember that a radio interview is a conversation between two people. If I have some people that I've sent and said, okay, here's a request for a 60-minute interview. And they're like, I don't know if I have the words to fill 60 minutes. Well, you are not getting on the air and giving a speech. You are not offering a monologue. Remember, it is a conversation. And that's just an important thing to remember, whether it's a 5-minute interview, a 10-minute interview, 30, 60 minutes, or whatever. It's a conversation. You are not preaching a sermon or giving a speech or anything like that. It's a conversation. So just, I think that's also something that scares people, is thinking that they have to have everything set in their mind about what they're going to say. This is exactly what I need to say. I've got to make sure I get this, and people are really worried about having their notes in front of them. And I want to make sure I know what to say when this comes up. There's a couple of things about that. First of all, somebody's radio show, if you're on a radio show, you're not running it. The host is running it. And go figure, I get a phone call. Hold on just a second. Chances are, okay, it's just going to ring one time because the Nomo Robo got it.
Okay.
Another tip, you should be doing your interviews on landlines, but make sure you turn off all other phones during the interview so that they aren't ringing in the middle of your conversation. So if you're on someone's radio program, the host runs the show. You don't run the show. So they're going to walk you through, the process. You need to remember that you are having a conversation with them, and you need to be able to take breaks and breathe, because they may need to interrupt you in order to do some kind of commercial break. They may be taking a call from, a call-in program, ask a question, a caller has a question to ask. Make sure that you aren't trying to run the show and control everything, because there's kind of two people, the people that want to run the show and the people that are even scared to get on the air.
Yeah.
So both sides need to remember that it's a conversation. So let the other person guide you. I promise most radio hosts, especially Christian ones, are not going to be the ones trying to necessarily prove their point. They are going to be friendly and let you share your message.
Yeah.
It's not like you're going on Fox News and getting into a political debate. There are exceptions to that rule, but just remember, most of these people are friendly and want you to be able to share your message and want to help you through this. So it'll be something that you're comfortable with. And again, you're sharing your message, sharing it from your heart.
Yeah. How much of a burden or of a responsibility should the author feel to fill the entire 60-minute interview? Like that's a long time to be talking with someone. So how would you recommend that they go about preparing for something like that so that they feel like they have enough to talk about, but also so that they're not overtaking it or they're just answering yes and no questions?
When you go into an interview, something to consider is looking at how long the interview is. So if you know that your interview is like 10 minutes, you know you're going to have to keep your answers pretty short. But think through, okay, if I have a long interview, how can I expand my answers? How can I make them longer? And it's something I tell authors to think through. Not everybody does this, but we definitely do this. If you are going to do publicity with us, I write a Q&A for you. I come up with the questions that we have as suggested interview questions. And these are the questions that we send out to stations to have you beforehand so that they will have access to that. And we'll have some questions on hand to be able to ask. Some hosts will come up with their own, and that's great. The hosts that come up with their own are prepared. That means they have done their homework. They have their own questions they want to ask. They may ask you in some of the others. And some will just do so many interviews and have so much going on, they will just go by the list of questions that we sent. So think about, if you have a 10-minute interview, think about how you can get your point across in sound bites. But then also think about, if you have a longer interview, a 60-minute interview, how you can expand on those answers. And the people that are the interview shows, the programs that have an hour long, those hosts are very seasoned and they are going to be able to get you through that. They're going to lead the conversation. They're going to come up. You're going to say something that's going to click with them, and they're going to ask a follow-up question to that and guide you through it. So you really don't have to worry about filling that time. And especially if you approach it as remembering it's a conversation, think about talking to a friend. I mean, Kaylin, you and I on the phone, we can easily fit, if given the opportunity, which we don't always have the opportunity because we've got so much going on, but think of how easy it is to have an hour-long conversation.
That's so true.
It is easier with someone you know than with a stranger, but this is a topic that you've written a book about. You want to be passionate about it, and it really shouldn't be that big of a deal to be able to fill a 60-minute conversation with that.
Yeah.
What I'll laugh at is I hear it from some pastor and minister types of not having the words, and I did have this come up lately, but I mean, I've had it come up over the years, and I'm like, okay. First of all, again, I guess the word of the day is conversation. Remember, you're having a conversation with someone, and with commercials and everything else, that's like 20 minutes of you talking. What pastor, minister, speaker hasn't used 20 minutes talking about their subject? It should be, don't think of it as I have to fill 60 minutes. Think of it as, hey, I get to talk about something that I'm passionate about for 20 minutes. So that's really what it is. On the topic of questions, yes, a lot of stations will go with those suggested interview questions, but don't freak out if they go off script. There are some people that, okay, you also, it's great if you have notes to refer to in front of you, but don't feel like you need to read that. In fact, please don't read it because please don't read it. Don't be like, be prepared, but be open to other questions. Know your material. It'll come off like you're reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you want to sound more comfortable than that. And you'll get better as you do more interviews. And you won't have to, hopefully you probably won't have to refer to your notes so much because you're going to kind of know what comes next, know what the flow is, and you're going to decide you want to say things differently the next time. Mm-hmm. So most of the time, and I've had people say, oh my goodness, they asked me these questions. They were so, they weren't on script. Please let me know ahead of time what the questions are. Sometimes the host doesn't know what the questions are going to be ahead of time because sometimes it just goes down a different route, or, you say something that just hits them personally and things are going to go down a different route. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, even if the questions aren't right on the script, they're not going to be all that different than those questions. It's probably not going to go down a lot of rabbit trails necessarily. So they're not going to be too far away from what you're used to answering. And if you really know your stuff, it's not going to be hard questions to answer.
That's so good. So good.
And I feel like I'm talking way too much right now, but
no, you're good.
But also, like I said, have next to you when you do an interview a glass of water in case you need to take a drink because you have been talking too much like me, and have a piece of paper nearby to jot by notes. If the host says something, I really want to, come back to that, kind of jot it down. So hopefully you'll have a chance to do that, or maybe to write yourself a note for something to remember later. Mm-hmm. Okay. We talked about it a little bit before. We're going to go talk about it again. Do not oversell your book because you're on there to talk about a topic. Everybody in the listening audience knows of a program, knows that a host usually talks to authors. And the host is going to say, introduce you by the name of the book. They're going to take a pause and say, by the way, we're talking to Audra Jennings about blah, 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 whatever her book is. People tell me I need to write a book, Caitlin. I don't feel like I have anything to say. I don't know what my book would be about. So they're going to say, hey, this is the author. You say your name, say what your book is. And they're going to bring it up. Let them be the ones to sell it because it's going to come off a whole lot better from them than from you. And don't name drop your book all the time. Every once in a while it's okay, but it's going to come off more natural. People are going to be more interested in what you have to say if you don't feel the need to name drop all the time. Mm-hmm. Because I think I've seen it on TV interviews and heard it in radio both, and it just comes off so unnatural if you feel like you need to name drop all the time. Because like I said, the host is running the show. Let the host run the show, and bring that up.
And I think it's important to remember that the listeners of the program, they're able to determine and filter out what is and isn't genuine. And so I think that if you do name drop and do stuff like that, people are they're gonna get turned off, unfortunately. And that's the opposite of what you want to have happen.
And I'm looking, and here I am looking at notes. If I look like my eyes are like bugging, I have a document that I always send to authors as we start every campaign. So I was checking those. Okay, here's something that comes up and has been coming up, goodness, probably for 10 years. People are getting away from having landlines in their houses, but that is still the best way to do a phone interview. So there are going to be occasions where it is demanded that you do. And you could say, oh, my cell phone never drops calls. I never have a problem with it. Even if you don't have drop calls, the sound quality comes off as different. So just throwing out there will be times where people will demand or require that you have a landline. So just figure out if your church has one, if a neighbor has one, something like that. The preference is for it to always happen. I do schedule a lot of interviews on cell phones just because that's how things are these days. But just something to keep in mind if you're going to do interviews, make sure that you can do that when it requires, and just go along with it and don't create a big stink, especially if you happen to be working directly with a radio program, just in case you don't have a publicist or whatever. Just know that sometimes you have to comply. Just wanted to throw that note in there real quick because that does come up along the way. I saw a really good note now. Now I'm going to remember what it was. Okay. Try to match the tone of your host. A lot of stations, a lot of programs, you can listen to a sample of an interview before you go on with them. So kind of have a feel for their personality. If you're a real serious person, you may have to perk up a little bit if you have a really perky host. And if you're really outgoing, you may have to tone it down just a little bit, if your host is really serious. Mm-hmm. So you can familiarize yourself with what a program is going to be before you go on. I'll always include a website link when I send a confirmation. So just go visit that. At least try to listen to a little clip if you can. You're not going to be able to listen to everybody before you do an interview, but it's good to kind of get a feel of what you're getting into beforehand.
What's kind of the etiquette for the interview after either before or taped it
live? I think I heard your question. You were kind of breaking out a little bit on me. I'm going to blame my internet connection. It's cold and kind of rainy here. I think it was a lot of interviews are live. Some of them do tape, but I don't know. It's probably... I was trying to think if I could kind of give percentages. A lot of the longer interviews are live, mm-hmm. and a lot of the shorter ones are taped, because the shorter ones are taped to insert in like the next day or something like that. Mm-hmm. That's not always the case, but a lot of times with longer interviews, they're done live because there's commercials inserted or call-ins mm-hmm. and that kind of thing. So, the interview, goodness, there goes my itchy nose again. So if the longer interviews usually have more kind of interruptions throughout, and the shorter ones are taped, and they may end up having to break it into a couple of pieces or edit it down. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Does that answer?
You answered a great question.
I told you I couldn't hear you. I'm just spouting off things now.
No, that's good information to know. What I originally asked was, what's the etiquette for promoting the interviews yourself?
Oh.
Like, should you do it before? Should you do it after? What avenues should you use?
Oh, okay. Oh, absolutely fabulous question, and so totally not what I answered at all. Okay, here's the deal. It's great to promote beforehand, especially if the program does live streaming, or to try to get listeners, like if it's a nationwide interview, or if the interview airs in Denver and you have a lot of friends and followers in Denver, definitely promote it beforehand to try to get people, to listen to it. If you have 10 interviews in 1 week, you may pick and choose, some of the bigger opportunities that people can listen into. And then afterwards, you can share links. Definitely. I think it's definitely good to share links. I would, if you're doing a bunch in 1 week, you may just save some of those links to use later on, between kind of some slow social media times. Yeah. And especially with, if you do a podcast, you may record it and it may not air for like, a month, and then it's like they usually debut on a certain day, but they're there for, ever. Mm-hmm. Loosely, you use the term forever, online, because sometimes they aren't, but, right. For a good, they're pretty permanent, I guess we'll say. So you can, always promote those later on, and you may want to, in between releases, pull up some of those links to share again. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's great. Definitely want to support the people that are interviewing you. So yeah, promote ahead of time and promote afterwards as well.
Okay. I have another question.
Okay.
Is it polite or not to ask about a radio station's listenership, to ask for their number?
This is always one of those tricky things. Hold on. It's hard for a radio station, especially a Christian station, doesn't always subscribe to like Arbitron and some of those ratings like that. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to know how many people are necessarily listening in. And sometimes all you can do is give an estimated listenership for that demographic area, or for that geographic area. And sometimes you can pull a little bit of demographic information, like the age of the listeners and that kind of thing. It's not usually a number that I can tell you if you ask me how many listeners there are. Some things that you can kind of do to gauge their audience is if something is in Atlanta, Georgia versus Hastings, Nebraska. Just so that's where Caitlin lives. Throwing those out there, you're going to know that Atlanta is going to draw more listenership than a station in Nebraska.
Right.
You look at that, and then you look at their website, and you can tell a lot by like looking at a website. You can tell, a smaller station, you're going to be able to tell the difference between a smaller station and a larger station by looking at that. But the thing is I get that you want to use your time wisely and hit the biggest number of listeners possible, but you never know who's listening in the small town that really needs to hear the message. Mm-hmm. And yes, absolutely, we want you to sell books. The goal is to sell books, but you really want to be able to reach people with your message at the end of the day. That's really the ultimate goal. So you can ask, but for your own knowledge, you may or may not get good stats because it's hard to track who's listening. People get in and out of their cars too. So, you just never know how many people. It's hard to gauge listenership numbers, I guess, is where my rambling is going.
Okay. That's good to know.
I mean, but there's some things that you can tell what's, a bigger listenership and that kind of thing. It comes up from time to time. It doesn't come up as often now as I think it once did. But it's and most of the time, if you were to ask the radio station that, they could not answer that for you. So if they can't answer that for you, I'm not going to be able to give you an answer.
You don't have the magic numbers?
I don't have the magic number. Unfortunately. But yeah, you can ask. You're probably not going to get necessarily great accurate information, though, if you ask.
Okay.
I know you wanted to talk about TV tips. A lot of what I've said about radio applies to TV, except for usually you have a smaller segment of time. Usually the TV tips revolve around wardrobe.
Mm.
One of Caitlin.
Because I think it's funny.
Caitlin's like, I want to know about wardrobe tips. Okay. First of all, no small patterns.
So how would this be? I purposefully wore this shirt today so that you could critique it.
So that you could critique it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say, for the most part, you're probably pretty good. But if you move around a little bit, I see a little bit of vibration in your pattern. So you might want to be careful with that. Usually stripes are no-no.
Okay.
I don't think yours are as bad as some do. And I was going to say it was fine until you started moving a little bit. And I got a little bit of a stripe vibration. Basically, do not wear stripes. I told a male author one day, like on the phone, I'm like, okay, no small patterns. He goes, oh, I have this shirt, and it'll look really good on screen. It's little blue and white stripes. And I'm like, no! Are you just listening to me? Because what it does, now, you won't see this often. Well, okay. Sometimes I wonder who dresses Al Roker. I'm not trying to criticize Al Roker, but people, most, this is going to sound horrible. Okay. Most TV people know better than this. But I was going to say, most of the time you won't see this on the news, but I've seen it with Al Roker. They put him in patterns, and the patterns just, you can't pay attention to what the person is saying because you got this vibration thing going on with their clothing pattern.
Right.
And I'm just like, the people on the Today Show know better than that.
You would think.
So I don't know what Al's talking about, but he's sitting there like strobe light, vibrating. It's very distracting. I also try to tell this. Okay, nobody's gonna know if I tell this story because it happened so many years ago, and I was working with an author from the UK who had to have bought this suit in London or something. I pick him up from the hotel, and probably no telling what the expression was on my face. He was dressed head to toe in houndstooth.
Wow.
Black and white houndstooth. Not seeing anything like it this side of the pond. I'm just looking at it like, A, that's so ugly. B, that is going to come off so bad on TV. And it wasn't the micro tiny houndstooth. Mm-hmm. It was a pretty, it was kind of, I thought, a pretty big pattern of it. Anyway, so just be careful with patterns because no telling what it's going to look like. Mm-hmm. Usually they tell you not to wear like red because that does weird things with the camera. Oh. Whites and cream colors usually wash people out, especially people with lighter colored skin. Mm-hmm. Darks are usually good. Navies, greens.
Green, even with the whole green thing?
Most people don't have, but most of the time you're not in front of a green screen.
Okay.
Unless you're, doing the weather or the traffic, you're probably okay. Without, because a lot of, I was about to say, I don't know that I've ever done a Christian show that was like had a green screen anywhere around. Mm-hmm. But navies, blues, sometimes pastel, either it's kind of check with the program you're doing. Pastels are good for a lot of people, or a lot of programs say pastels are okay. As long as they're like a color pastel, not like too light, like come close to like yellow, cream, that kind of thing, or jewel tones. I always tell women, make sure you wear don't wear necessarily a dress, but wear something with like either pants or a skirt so that microphone can go at your waistband in the back.
Wow, that's
remember that you're probably going to have to wear a microphone. So how comfortable are you going to be in those clothes and having to put wires, up your back or anything like that?
Right.
Definitely want somewhere that the battery pack can sit on the back. So also remember, just be smart, things. If you're going to be sitting down, how comfortable are you going to be in that skirt that you're wearing?
Good
You
question.
know, don't want to go too short. Things like that. Yes, so be careful. Also, jewelry. Yes, jewelry looks great, but make sure you don't end up like, patting like yourself or something, talking about me, doing hand gestures towards yourself, or big chunky jewelry like that moves around because it'll clank against the microphone and it'll make noise. Even if your jewelry usually doesn't make a lot of noise, it will make noise on a microphone when you're on TV.
That's good to know. Stuff you wouldn't think about normally.
So yeah, things that you wouldn't think about. So leave your houndstooth at home. Leave your big honking necklace, might want to leave it at home. So yeah. Don't worry, and just think about how your clothes lay and that kind of thing is you're going to come off awkward. So, like I said, most radio things apply to TV too, but in TV you have to worry about the wardrobe.
Yeah. Huh. I feel like I've learned some stuff today.
Oh, yay!
Not that I plan on being interviewed anytime soon, but
yeah, it's like I'll just give the advice. I don't particularly want to be interviewed, but I think these videos have probably really been good for me in expanding my confidence in like being on the webcam and having conversations like with the public, even though, but then again, it's just me and you talking a lot of the time. So thinking of it as that kind of conversation that somebody just may or may not be, watching helps too.
Right.
So I guess maybe that's the thing to end with is remember, have your conversation, going back to the magical word of the day, have your conversation with the radio host and forget that anybody's listening.
That's so good. That's such a good thing to end with because it really comes across, I feel like, when you do have that mindset that, oh, I'm just chatting with someone else and other people happen to be listening in, but if you can kind of forget that, I think it comes across as way more natural and way more genuine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yay! Okay, good. Thank you for sharing the tips.
You are welcome. If any of you, and we're really recommending, if any of you have any questions about PR, social media, we may not be able to tell you how to write a book, but anything book related, we will try our best to answer your questions. So submit them, and we may even do that next week.
Yes, please do. And we'll see you guys again here next week at 1:30 Eastern Time, which is 10:30 Pacific Time in the morning. Wednesday. Every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday.
All right. Thanks, Audra. And thank you guys for watching. Hope everybody has a good week.
Talk to you later, Kaylin.
All right. Bye.